And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis. Next to me is my beautiful co-host, Laraib, as we break down yet another great week of NFL action. We are 7 weeks through the season. We're starting to kind of figure out who's the contenders, who are the pretenders, and who's trying to tank for some of these great quarterbacks coming in the draft. This is a pivotal part of the season where some of these games are getting pretty predictable, but even this week we had some major upsets that we will definitely hit in today's episode, Laura. But probably the biggest upset that happened this weekend was you dominating me in the pick. So I know you're very excited
Oh
to touch
yeah.
on that.
I think dominating is the correct word. 12-5, Lewis. And
Jeez.
all the games that we disagreed on, I got them right, like you're saying. Your upset and your lock both miss, unfortunately for you. And I keep on my hot streak keeps on going, Lewis. Now it's 3-4, and I'm hoping for another big win this next week.
Yeah, I need to stop. I talk about bad advice and then I preach it. I just need to stop listening to myself or start listening to myself and stop picking the Packers and the Colts. We'll see a very smart Lewis come Thursday's episode. But Larav, let's talk about these next few games. Let's start with, of course, our teams, the Saints Seattle corner. We'll start with the bad news and then get into the good news. Of course, bad news means we're talking about the New Orleans Saints in this instance. Played on Thursday night, so at least I was able to watch Sunday football with no stress. Because the Saints, it was the first half was very competitive. We were running the ball, imposing our will. Andy Dalton, he threw a pick in the end zone, but we were able to match points. Our defense was hanging in there, except giving up a bunch of big running plays in the first half. And, Taysom Hill touchdown. We're up by one, looking good. We just had 2 minutes left on the clock going into to end the half. Like, hey, Cardinals get the ball, so let's try to get a field goal or something here. Instead, we throw two straight pick sixes on consecutive drives, going into the half down 14 points, and that just killed everything for this team. All the momentum, it just killed everything. They had an admirable comeback. Our offense had to play catch up the entire time because of the hole they put themselves in. And the problems for the Saints, our secondary is completely decimated. We're not really getting pressure whatsoever. Just talking about defense, and all of a sudden we can't stop the run whatsoever. Tyrann Mathieu looked like that was just a really bad investment. We wanted the big LSU connection, and all the Saints fans were mad because, oh, Sean Payton hates LSU players. He never wants to bring in the hometown favorites. Well, maybe there's a reason, right? Maybe they're not that good. Maybe we think they're better than they are. Jarvis Landry's been injured for the past 2 weeks with a toe injury, and Tyrann Mathieu is washed. He can't tackle anyone over 200 pounds. And I don't know. And as for the offense, you're not getting consistent quarterback play. Your top two receivers are just constantly missing. Chris Olave looks like a hit. If there's one positive about this team, it's Chris
For sure.
Olave and Rashid Shaheed's one touchdown a week. Also, his only target or catch the whole one target, one catch, touchdown last week. One target, one catch this week, touchdown, and we don't use him for the rest of the game. So that's my quick rant. Things are looking bleak in New Orleans, but the worst part is, Laura, we're only 1.5 games back of the division because the NFC South has been playing so awful. So I will continue to be tortured for the rest of the season.
And then going into the complete opposite direction, Lewis, my Seahawks have just been balling out. We're leading our division now at 4-3. We still have a couple of big games ahead of us. We still have to play the Chiefs. We still have to play we play the 6-1 Giants this week. We still have to play the Buccaneers in Germany. And so we still have a couple of tests ahead of us, Lewis. But I'm just ecstatic about how well this team has been playing, right? All the eyes have been on the rookies and Kenneth Walker and Tariq Woolen. But you got to give credit to this offensive line with Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross, the first round pick. And so all the rookies have been balling out. The coaching staff has been balling out. I know a lot of people were hating on Pete Carroll. They're saying he was the one holding back Russell Wilson, but it looks like it was the other way, Lewis. And this team has really established an identity with the ground and pound game, like Pete Carroll's always been, preaching in Seattle. I know DK Metcalf went down with a scary injury, but the X-rays came back negative on that. And even if he's gone for a little bit, Lewis, we saw Marquise Goodwin had 2 touchdowns in that game. And Tyler Lockett has always been a stud. And so I'm just excited for what this team can do this season. And of course, with the Broncos at 2-5, we have their draft pick for this year. And so that's going to be amazing heading into the, later half of the season. And go Hawks.
All I know is when we played, the Saints won, and that's my Super Bowl for the year. So I couldn't care less. But I remember we were at halftime of that game when the Seahawks were walking back to the locker room. Talk about Abe Lucas. I just saw this giant, like super athletic looking dude. And I looked at you because he was wearing a number. He looked like a defensive end. And I looked at you, I was like, who is Lucas? Who is that? And he's like, oh, he's our rookie tackle. He's been playing amazing. Tariq Woolen. Y'all definitely have a really bright future out of nowhere. I'm happy for y'all, and we'll see what happens the rest of the year because I know you got some tough games. But let's move into probably the game with the most headlines from last week. We have the Chiefs playing at San Francisco, and they just laid the pounding on the 49ers in that second half, Laraib. What was your biggest takeaway from the game?
Well, Lewis, I think it was the injuries that the 49ers have all across the board, right? You mentioned it on the preview from last week talking about this game, and the injuries have finally caught up to this team. Even though Trent Williams came back, they couldn't get much going. And Jimmy Garoppolo, like I mentioned, he has these games every year where he throws some bad picks, some bad plays here and there, and it really costs him games. And when you're on home and you give up, 40 points to the Chiefs looking like the best team, no, the second best team behind the Buffalo Bills in the league. And so for the 49ers, I think Kyle Shanahan, you're still right there at the top of the division. It's really close race. And so let's see what they can do when they get some of their players back, Lewis.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. You'd expect, you get Nick Bosa back last week. You expect more pressure, especially after seeing what the Bills were able to do against the Chiefs when they played. But the pressure was really not getting to Patrick Mahomes at all. I think their offensive line played a really good game. Nick Bosa was just kind of out of it, I guess, coming back from injury, trying to work some things. And Arik Armstead was not playing in that game. So I think as they start to get guys back, and we didn't even talk about it because this happened on Friday after our podcast, the Christian McCaffrey trade, which was huge. And he got some run in. A lot of people didn't even know if he'd play just 48 hours before the game when the trade happened. But he did play, and he looked pretty impressive in that scheme. So you expect them to integrate him more in the weeks to come and for them to look more and more impressive. But hopefully for this 49ers team, they get the injuries out of the way now. It's good signs that guys like Bosa and Williams are coming back. But the biggest problem with this team is that's ultimately what's been their ceiling this entire run with Shanahan Garoppolo is you see the stark contrast when Garoppolo faces an elite quarterback. It's like, oh, we don't have that guy. We have Garoppolo who's fine. He's serviceable and he can win you close games. But against a guy like Mahomes, Allen, it's really you can't really count on him at all. That's why they made the huge gamble for Trey Lance. And well, he's injured now, so we won't. They're stuck with Garoppolo. And that's gonna be their situation. Maybe he gets, they get lucky breaks, turnovers, things like that. But if they're not getting pressure and if they're not helping Jimmy Garoppolo out in every single way, then he's going to have games like this against superstar quarterbacks where he's obviously not the best quarterback on the field.
Right. And then moving on to the Chiefs, Lewis, just an absolute offensive explosion, right? Juju Smith-Schuster continues another great week from last week. And we just see this offense when it's clicking, Lewis. I think arguably it's the best offense in the league with Eric Bieniemy, Patrick Mahomes, and like we said, Patrick Mahomes with time in the pocket, he's the ultimate threat in the NFL. And so for the Chiefs, keep on building on great wins like this. Only -1 on the road, which was an interesting line to see, Lewis, when they beat the 49ers by 20 points. And so I think we're definitely looking at the Chiefs dominating the AFC, and it's going to be exciting to watch them and the Bills in the AFC Championship later this year.
All right, Laraib. So we did a topic last week regarding the Packers and the Bucks. I said Packers-Bucks meltdown from last week, but we saw their upcoming games. Like if you need get-back games, these are the games to do it. And boy, oh boy, they did not get back. The Packers only managing, Packers losing to a Carson Wentz-less Commanders team without
That's a better team.
One of the
That's
best,
a better team.
One of the best.
Wentz.
All right, so you're wrong, but we'll move on from that. Just a crushing loss, 2-point loss, but it's a game that you were 5.5-point favorites. And like I said, why I made them my lock, this is a game you needed because as you're losing these games over and over and over, the Vikings who are on bye, they're sitting there at 5-1 and they have an easy path to division now. All they need to do is beat you one more time and win 2 more games. And they have basically all they need in that division. And then we look at the other team, Tampa, who put up 3 points at Carolina after losing a horrible game to Pittsburgh last week. You put up 3 points at Carolina. This offensive line is in shambles. Tom just looks frustrated all the time. And this defense was letting up huge runs to a team that just traded their best running back. Which of these two teams, I think I asked you this question last week, which of these two teams are you more concerned with, or is it just complete chaos for both?
It's definitely complete chaos for both, Lewis. But like you mentioned earlier, the Buccaneers still leading their division. Meanwhile, the Packers are really starting to fall behind. And I know that they still have to play the Vikings, but they still have a couple of easy games. But we said this was supposed to be an easy game, right? I said last week, oh, all right, the Commanders are playing the Commanders, a free win, and you literally jumped out of your seat telling me this is one of those games where they must win. And so I really don't know what to say about either of these quarterbacks, Lewis. I think Father Time. I think Tom Brady. You told me this, that Tom Brady already beat Father Time. When he won that Super Bowl a couple years ago, but now it's really starting to catch up to him. And the play calling for this team is just absolutely horrendous. The amount of times they try to run the ball when they're down big, it's ridiculous. And for the Packers, we said Aaron Rodgers is just going to mail it in when stuff starts to get bad. And so both these teams was really, really interesting. What the head coaching is going to be like, what the coordinator is going to be like, and what that locker room is going to be like with these two MVP quarterbacks in there. What's the situation going on in the locker room?
Yeah, I mean, you say they have some games on their schedule, but looking at their schedule now, they still have games this week at Buffalo, home for Dallas, home for Tennessee, at Philly, home for the Rams, at Miami, and then home for the Vikings. They only have 3 games at and home for the Lions and another at Chicago that are like, you should win those games. But considering their last 3 losses were against the Giants, Jets, and Commanders, teams that, yeah, they might be surprising, but no one expected anything, especially not beating the Commanders. 2 of those losses being at home for the Packers. I mean, this is looking really grim for them. And when you see Minnesota just continuing to win in their division, this is a team that we went from saying 2 weeks ago, yeah, but they could still make the playoffs, to on betting websites, they are now underdogs to make the playoffs. On FanDuel, they're plus 150 to make the playoffs. So if you have faith in Aaron Rodgers or seen anything, and how many times have I been burned by this Packer team trying to bet on them? So that looks like an awful bet right there. Like they're just inviting you to pay money to see this Packers team burn and die. And like you said, for the Buccaneers, I think they have problems that can't be fixed. This offensive line is not going to get any healthier. There's no one coming down the pike. Rob Gronkowski seems like he's saying very content in his retirement right now. He's not coming back. You lose Brait for a while. So Tom and this awesome weapons room. You still have Mike Evans, but he looked pretty banged up in the game. And they could just not run the ball whatsoever. You can say that's a Leonard Fournette thing. You can say that's just the offensive line, or the fact that no one, they couldn't run the ball on like 5-man fronts because you're so afraid of Tom Brady in this passing game. And sure, Brady put up decent numbers, but you can't score 3 points at Carolina. I still think the Bucs have the talent to win this division, but this is a team that, if the Giants or some wild card team from the NFC goes to Tampa, it's going to be a tough game. I don't think this is a Super Bowl team, how they're constructed as of now. And you're not getting anything from Julio Jones. So it's a lot of question marks around this team, around Brady and his personal life. And maybe that's affecting him on the field, because it's not looking great for the Buccaneers right now.
Yeah, for sure, Lewis. And how do you feel about either of these head coaches? Todd Bowles comes in after Bruce Arians is gone, and they haven't looked how they're supposed to look. And then you look at the head coach over there in Green Bay, 13-3, 13-4 the past couple seasons, and now with no weapons offensively. Which one of these which one of these head coaches do you feel like is on the hotter seat right now?
It's tough to say because, like you said, Matt LaFleur's resume kind of speaks for itself with the 3 consecutive 13-win seasons, and he's shown his pedigree in big games, but also like how much of the blame is on the quarterback in these situations. For Todd Bowles, he doesn't really have a great resume as a head coach. He's an outstanding defensive mind, defensive coordinator, but is he getting his message over to the offensive players like Arians was? And Arians is still in the building, so it's kind of hard to see like, oh, well, I mean, you sure Arians isn't telling these guys the same things and telling Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich, the offensive coordinator, kind of the same game plan. So it's like that brain trust is still in the building. So I think it's just the players, these teams who have been successful for so long. We see this all the time in the NFL. Sustained success is extremely difficult because when you have success, guys need to get paid. You have people who, who play in these long seasons, long postseasons, who are more susceptible to injuries, starting to pile up, pile up, pile up. And you get these two, storied franchises, or at least for the past few seasons, very successful franchises starting to fall and fail. And it's getting to a point where the talent on these teams is not adding up. So, but to answer your question, I would probably say LaFleur, because you just see so many miscommunication with Rodgers and all these post-game interviews where Rodgers is saying, keep the offense simple, try to simplify things. And then LaFleur is saying, oh, I have no idea what he's talking about. Yeah, it's just the miscommunication is definitely there. And then you know what makes this Packers team successful. They're trying to do things. Their biggest strength in offense is those running backs and Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon, and pounding and then getting something in the play action game. You can't run a traditional Aaron Rodgers offense with these weapons. Yet they keep trying to put a square into a triangle hole and trying to make something work that does not. Just run the ball, be the 49ers, and then work off that. Yes, you have a talented quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, but if you don't have the ancillary parts on the outside to help him succeed, it's just not going to work. But it's not just the parts on the outside. Everything is a problem there. And for some reason, this defense we thought was going to be really good. And to carry them before the season, they can't stop the run. Jair Alexander, this top 5 corner, was getting cooked by Terry McLaurin yesterday, giving up crucial third down after crucial third down on those final drives. So there's so many problems with this Green Bay team that I honestly do not think they can make the playoffs. Now, they have the pedigree, they have the history that it's hard to bet against them, but the way they've been playing, it's not going to get any better. There's no help on the way. You really think OBJ wants to go to this train wreck, especially as it gets colder in Green Bay? Not a chance. So between these two teams, I have more faith in Tampa just because of the competition, but I don't see any of these teams representing the NFC this season.
Yeah, for sure, Lewis, and a couple of surprise teams in the NFC. But let's move on to another segment, Lewis. I think you have something brand new lined up for the first and goal pod.
So we are, past week 7. We're filming this before Monday Night Football, Patriots and Bears. So we'll see what happens in that game. I think we have a pretty good read. And my best bet, we love the Patriots tonight. But our thing now is we kind of know who's separating themselves from the pack, who's going to be a playoff contender. But really, when you think about it, it's a lot more murky than you think. There's a lot of teams vying for these 7 playoff spots in each conference, and it's a lot of teams that you wouldn't expect. So, Laraib, I'm going to give you 6 teams, 3 from each conference, and I want you, on a scale from 1 to 10, give me your confidence, 10 being they're a lock to make the playoffs, 1 being there's no way they're making the playoffs, and 5 that just they could go either way this season. So I'm going to start with the AFC, Laraib. The first team I'm going to give you is the 5-2 New York Jets. The New York Jets, plus 22 differential in the season. They have 4 straight wins, leaning on some rookies who starting to look pretty shaky with some injuries. What is your prediction for this playoff team?
Well, Lewis, I'm going to go with a 5.
Okay.
Let me explain myself just a little bit. Breece Hall was the machine for this offense. He was the cog that turned the wheel for this team, and now he's gone, unfortunately, for the rest of the season. Zach Wilson, when he came back, he has not been playing very well. I know this defense has been stout. They have some good players, and Sauce Gardner, but their wins have come against teams like the Steelers, who are not that good, the Dolphins without Tua, the Packers, which are falling, and now the Broncos team, which we know has been playing bad all year. And so you look at some of the other teams in the AFC who I think are going to creep in. Right now, the Bengals aren't in the playoff race, or excuse me, in the playoffs currently. A couple other teams who I still think can still sneak in. And the Jets team, they've been playing solid, but I think the injuries with Breece Hall, Zach Wilson really hasn't looked too impressive to me. And so I think I'll put them around a 5, Lewis. Iffy.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit lower than you. I'm going to go a 4, just because, I've liked what this defense has been able to do all season, but they've played some pretty fraudulent offenses in the past few weeks. And like you said, their offense was so Brees Hall reliant, and he was so huge for them, and he just created so many big plays. But I just don't think down the stretch of the season, losing him, and they lost stud tackle, second year guy Elijah Vera Tucker for the season as well. So you've lost so many, and obviously you lost Mekhi Becton before the season. They're on like their fourth tackle at this point, and you just can't keep losing these offensive parts for a quarterback who just came off an injury and, like you said, has not been playing well. I do not have a lot of faith in this team. And I just feel so bad for Jets fans because you get all this promise this season, guys playing out of their mind, and then just the injury bug kills your team to where I don't think they make the playoffs this year. But I want to move on to our next team, Laura. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that the Los Angeles Chargers, a team that you were paying special attention to last week, how confident are you that they can make the playoffs?
Lewis, I'm going to go with a 4 on this one. All
wow.
right.
Jake Herbo.
This is really tough for me, Lewis. You know, the Chargers have a special place in my heart. You know, you have your favorite team is the NFC. Of course, you have to have your favorite AFC team, and that's the team for me. Justin Herbert, he's just been my favorite guy in the NFL since he started a couple of years ago against the Chiefs in that one game. And it's really hard to see this team with Brandon Staley head coach just suffering week after week with a terrible play calling. And then the injuries, Lewis, just keep on stacking up. Mike Williams twisted his ankle really bad in that game. J.C. Jackson had a horrific injury also in that game. And so the injuries are piling up. You know, Bosa, he's always in and out of games. Khalil Mack has looked a step slower than he has been. And so I think with all the competition in the AFC, with the bad coaching, they've eked out some good wins, Lewis, and they're sitting at 4-3. They're right in the race, but it's going to be really questionable with this head coaching, with all the injuries. It's going to be really difficult, I think, in my opinion, for them to sneak in.
Well, you say they've eked out some good wins, but the combined amount of wins from their 4 wins this season is 6. They beat the 2-5 Raiders, the 2-5 Broncos, the 2-5 Browns. Oh, my bad. 7. And the 1-5-1 Texans. So these great wins don't really look that great because here's what you have coming down the schedule. You have at San Francisco, home for the Chiefs, at Arizona, at Las Vegas, home for the Dolphins, home for the Titans, at the Colts, home for the Rams, and the Broncos again. That is a brutal schedule. And that's why, Laraib, I'm going to go lower than you. I think it's a 3. Man. And this is a team that also has suffered some big injuries that they didn't anticipate coming beforehand. And for me, it's just Herbo, the way you get Keenan Allen back last week, which was huge, but he did not look 100%. And it looked like he really didn't have much of an impact on that game. And their running defense is awful. I've said this from the beginning of the year. They did nothing to fix that. Yes, you got Khalil Mack, J.C. Jackson, your standout corner who was benched last week, is out for the season now. So, and neither of those guys help you in the run game. And we saw Kenneth Walker just go absolutely nuts on them last week. And that's not going to change as you play some of these run-heavier teams later in the season. Because what wins late in the season, December and January? It's running the ball and playing good defense. And the Chargers, their offensive identity was passing the ball, air raid, and they've had no success. They've had to go on these long drives, and it's been tough for Herbo to kind of figure these things out. So I do not have much faith in them making the playoffs because I have this next team that I do have a lot of confidence in, but they have not played their game yet because they play tonight. The New England Patriots, Laraib. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that they can make the playoffs?
Lewis, call me crazy here. I'm going to say a 7. All right. I really like what this team has been doing. I know we were dogging on them all year long. Mac Jones is going to play tonight, so we'll see how that experiment goes. Bailey Zappi was playing really well, but I think Bill Belichick, he's back to his genius. The defense is playing solid. They play in a tough division, Lewis, but I think the AFC is wide open. When they win tonight, Lewis, they'll be 4-3 right there with the Dolphins, right there with the Chargers, and right there with the Bengals. So they're right in the thick of things, Lewis. I know you'll bring it up about their schedule. What an easy schedule they have probably coming forward. And so I really like this team. Ramondre Stevenson I know you really liked him before the season started, and they've just been balling out. And we said the weapons were lacking, and I still think that's what's going to be the issue for this team. But so far, we've seen Devontae Parker have a good game. We've seen some of the other guys have big games, and with Hunter Henry at the tight end position, I really like what the team can do this season.
Yeah, see, you said call you crazy, but I'm at an 8 because
Mm.
I've been super impressed. This is a team that I don't think they're a contender, right? But we thought this last year as well. We were like, okay, before the season, you have no offensive weapons. This team is a joke. Belichick is washed. Yet they ran the ball and they played great defense and they made the playoffs pretty convincingly. They made it as a 6 seed last year. And I think they can do that again. Laraib, this schedule, their next 4 games is, they play the Bears tonight, then they have at Jets, home for the Colts, and then home for the Jets. Those you should win 4 in a row and be sitting at 8-3. And if you could be 8-3, now the rest of their schedule is tough. You have at Minnesota, home for the Bills, at the Cardinals, at the Raiders, home for the Bengals, Dolphins, Bills. But if you can win some of those home games, get some momentum, I can see this team winning 10, 11 games this season. I think they just have the formula to. Now, the quarterback position is a question for me. I know Mac Jones is back, but I really liked what I saw from Zappy. So I think if there's some questions about Mac Jones, that could be unnecessary drama. And, Belichick just zips that in the
Oh
butt
yeah,
if
we
there's
know
drama.
Bill. If he knows Mac Jones is done for, it doesn't matter when he was drafted,
He'll
how much
move
he's
on.
getting paid. Zappy will be in there, guarantee.
Right.
And so interesting, Lewis, that you like them at 8. I know you talked about last year. It's going to be really interesting to see. I think the Colts, breaking news: Sam Ellinger will be the quarterback for the rest of the season. And so you look at the team like the Colts, who are pretty down there. The Broncos are down there. The
Right.
Browns are down there, and so I think they definitely have a shot, Lewis, at grabbing one of those 7, 6, 5 seeds.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a conference where you still have, I'm not going to hit all these teams, but you still have the Bengals who are in that mix, the Ravens who are in the mix. You still have the Raiders, who I think are a better team than their record indicates. They're still in the mix as well. So you have a lot of these teams fighting for those last 3 spots. And are we going to completely write off the Browns if Watson comes back? Because they have a lot of talent on their team. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the season ends out for the AFC. Now we have the NFC, which I think is a little bit more shocking because it's really hard to see who's going to make the playoffs. And my first team for you is, of course, your Seattle Seahawks. I think we'll differ on this one, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that your Seahawks can make the playoffs?
Lewis, I'm gonna say a 6.
Okay.
All right.
All
Nothing
right.
too crazy. Nothing too crazy. I know we lead the division right now. We still, like I mentioned, when we started the show, we still have a lot of tests ahead of us, right? Our rookies have been playing really well. Geno Smith is playing really well, but it's gonna take some toughness and some grit to beat some of these teams later on, like the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, the Giants this week. And so I still need to see something else out of this team. We've had some bad losses, right? We lost to the Saints.
It's
Right? That looks like a bad loss. And
an
so
awful loss.
and the NFC this year, Lewis, is a lot of great teams. The Giants are up there. The NFC East has just been dominating. Currently, the 49ers are not in the playoffs. The Packers aren't in the playoffs. And so I think it's going to be close, Lewis, but I have hope in this team.
Yeah, this might shock you, but I'm also at a 6. I
All
think
right.
that you're absolutely right. They still have games. They still have to play the Rams twice. We saw how they looked in their last meeting against the 49ers. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the biggest drawback for me from going all in because I like so much about the Seattle team. But that game left a really bad taste in my mouth because if Geno's been playing some pretty bad defenses. And when he plays these great defenses that are definitely coming down the stretch, it's going to be tough because he beat the Lions who have a really bad defense, the Cardinals who don't have a great defense, and we know the Chargers don't have a great defense. The Broncos in Week 1, that was just the
Emotions
ultimate
are running
Seattle
high.
game,
Right.
right?
Right.
So but I'm still confident in this team because I love what these young players have been doing, and it looks like Metcalf is not going to need surgery, so he should come back soon. But I mean, down the stretch, it's not even that bad of a schedule. You play the Giants this week, which I think should be game of the week. That's going to be a super fun game and a super big test for both teams, in my opinion. And then you have games, you have Panthers on your schedule, the Jets on your schedule, but then you have Chiefs, 49ers, Rams twice, Buccaneers. So we'll see what this team is made of playing some legit defenses, but it might be a while before you face a really, stout defense. So I have confidence in this team, probably to your surprise. But let's move on to the team that you'll be playing it next week, Laraib, the New York Giants, sitting at 6-1. And you're probably thinking, Lewis, they're a lock, right? I mean, they're 6-1, sitting second only to the undefeated Eagles in the NFC. Why am I even putting them in the segment? Well, Rob, I ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that the Brian Daboll Giants will make the playoffs?
Lewis, this is one's gonna shock you. I'm gonna say 7.
Okay.
I think Brian Daboll has really, really energized this team. Just their rushing attack has just been awesome, and they've won some big games. Lewis, we can confidently say that they beat the Ravens, in a big game. As much as you want to say the Packers aren't that good, they still were down 10 points. It's a big game overseas. You're down 10 points, you crawl back in, right? This week against the Jaguars, I know they looked a little iffy, but the defense holds on all the way to the very end. And so I just really like what this team has done offensively, and defensively. And so, I think at a 7, I like them.
My biggest concern with this Giants team is they have won all these games by just one score. And their loss to the Cowboys was by 10 points, which was a pretty significant loss. So my thing with this team is, all right, let me give you a number. On a confidence scale, I think it's an 8 because their schedule going forward is cheeks. I mean, it's easy pickings for these guys going forward. So if they get to 10 wins in this NFC, or even if they get to 9 wins in this NFC, and they're already almost there, they easily make the playoffs, in my opinion. However, how successful they are is a huge question because I don't think this team is winning a playoff game, even if they get a home playoff game, because this Giants team is just they win and it's so unconvincing. They have to do all this trickery, these 15 play drives. Daniel Jones has not turned the ball over at all this season. That's just red flag for me. He's running the ball at an insane rate. They're relying on all these third, fourth string receivers to really carry them. This team, there's a lot of red flags. I think they will make the playoffs, and I think there's a lot of Brian Daboll. He's a hit. He's amazing. Saquon, he's a hit. He's amazing. But the fact that they're 3-point underdogs against the Seahawks next week, and we'll talk about that game, it's just you can't always be underdogs and win in one-score games. Eventually, you're going to face a team that's just better than you, and you're going to get your butt kicked. And I think that's going to happen down the line. But I do think this team can make the playoffs. But our final team, Laraib, is the Super Bowl champs, the Los Angeles Rams, coming off a bye week, 3-3. How much confidence do you have that they can potentially get back to the playoffs and maybe repeat? Just the playoffs. Just the playoffs,
Lewis. I'm going to go with a 4.
Really?
This team has been really, really disappointing, Lewis. Like we mentioned, the offensive line has been playing bad. How much can one team rely on Cooper Kupp, right?
Right.
Cam Akers is now gone, so it's going to be Darrell Henderson and, whatever random they sign off their practice squad. And so that rushing attack doesn't look that good. And as much as you think you can rely on defense on Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey just hasn't looked like that guy this season. And then when you're playing in this tough NFC West, Lewis, there's going to be a lot of fighting back and forth, and they have to really battle, Lewis. And I'll let you bring up their schedule about who they're playing the rest of the season. But I think it's going to be really tough for them. They're going to have to win some great games on the road, at home, and so I'm going to put them at a 4, Lewis.
Yeah, Laraib, you know what? I mean, I'm at a 5. I'm middle of the road. I know that's the loser's way out in this situation, but it's just hard for me to they're coming off a bye. This is huge for them because this next game against the 49ers is massive. They need this game. Not tipping my hand on who I'm picking yet, but this is a game the Rams need on their schedule. Regardless of what that means, because the Packers needed a win last week, but never mind.
Dude, that's why you've been doing so bad in the picks. Nobody needs to do anything.
Yeah, I'm just in my mind. The teams obviously don't need to win. But no, I mean, their remaining schedule, they have some tough games. They have this next stretch, 49ers, Bucks, Cardinals, they have a gimme against the Saints, but then at Chiefs, Seahawks, Raiders, Packers. Packers are a gimme, but then you have Broncos, Chargers, Seahawks. There's none of these games for the 40 this Rams team that we've seen this season are gimmies. Kind of like what we said about the Packers. You were not this juggernaut that we thought you were. You beat the PJ Walker Panthers. At least that's something the Bucks couldn't do. But it's really tough for me to see this team, like you said, their offensive identity is completely shot. It's just cup, and that's unsustainable. Matt Stafford is second in the league in interceptions, but I'm sure he will take that crown because Matt Ryan is now out for the season. But he keeps turning the ball over, forcing things. The rest of the receivers are really not that great. And like you said, the loss of Von Miller was huge because Aaron Donald, he still looks good, but I don't think he's prime Aaron Donald anymore. And Jalen Ramsey, yeah, there's huge questions on his ability. Now, they got their Super Bowl. They did their mission last year, and I think their fans are super content, even if this team doesn't make the playoffs. But you want to see, for the Rams fans and Rams in general, they want to be successful. They built this team to have sustained success. It wasn't just one and we're done. So this season, it's tough. And that's why it's 50-50. I want to see how this team comes out of the bye week and plays the 49ers before I make a super strong opinion on them. But I'm excited to see how the rest of this season unfolds and who makes the playoffs, Laraib. But first, before we get out of here, did you have any other comments on the Rams?
No, I think it's going to be really tough for them. Like you mentioned, we'll see how they do this season, Lewis. But before we end this podcast, we have to do our Thursday night preview, Lewis.
Yes, sir.
We have the Baltimore Ravens at 4-3 visiting Tampa to play the Buccaneers. Baltimore -1.5 in this one, Lewis. How do you feel about that line?
I think it should be higher. I mean, it's really interesting. Now, this game is in Tampa, but off a short week, I don't know, because both these teams look so shoddy to me. The Ravens, Lamar looked pretty dang bad in that last game against the Browns. After, the scripted plays were over, he just could not get much going. Yes, it's a division rival and you won the game. That's huge. And what's the stat, Laraib? Has Lamar Jackson ever lost to an NFC opponent? Yes. Yes, he lost to the Giants. So you can throw that away now. Let's see if he can get his get back against Tom Brady and the struggling Buccaneers team. This is going to be a really interesting game because both these teams have a lot of flaws. And we know you can run on this Buccaneers team, but they have no one on the outside for the Ravens. So it's almost like your weakness, you can attack a weakness, but your weakness is on the other side of the ball. It's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I like the Ravens in this matchup.
And I have to agree with you. I also like the Ravens in this one. I know Tom Brady, you never bet against him, but he just kept on, shooting us over and over again, Lewis. And now the Ravens, I think we were giving Lamar so much praise of how he started off the season, both rushing and passing, but that's fallen off slowly week after week, Lewis. But I think they can get it right this game against the Buccaneers defense, which is playing bad, and against the Buccaneers offense, which is playing even worse. And so I like the Ravens on the road.
Yeah, it seems we both agree. My final score for this game, I think the Ravens win a high scorer. I think it's going to be 31 to Buccaneers 26. I just think Ravens get out early. Tampa Bay tries to come back, but a late touchdown by the Ravens ices the game. Give me the Ravens.
All right, I'm just going to go a little bit less scoring than you, Lewis, but I like the Ravens 26-24.
Mark Andrews masterclass incoming after that last awful week. But that'll do it today for the Lewis and Laraib podcast. Just to remind you, all of our socials are in the description below. Check this episode out. This episode will be dropping on Tuesday. And our predictions for the rest of the NFL games for week 8 are going to be in our next episode dropping Thursday. Rob, any other comments before we head out?
No, I think this is going to be the First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.